For today's Monday makeup lesson, I'm going to show you how to create this very soft smoky eye. If you're new to the Makeup Chair channel and you like tutorials like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you're already subscribed, then thank you and welcome back. Now let's get started in creating this look. To create this look, you are going to need an eyeshadow primer, a pencil liner. I'm using a deep plum shade. You're going to need 2 eyeshadows, and I'm using this purpley tone and then this beigey tone. In my next video, I'll show you how you can add some of the other shades, but let's just focus on 2 for now. You're also going to need a small brush. I'm using the E01, and a fluffy brush. I'm using the E20. So to start with, I already primed my eyelids. This is going to give our eyeshadow something to hold on to while creating a blank canvas for us to work on. And then the next step is to take that pencil, and what we're going to do is we're going to line right by the lash line. And we don't want to come on front ways, we want to kind of slide it across. This will just make it so much easier. So I rest my pinky on my cheek and then do short little strokes working along the lash line. And I always start from the center point of my lid working outwards, and then I can start to blend a small line on the inner part as well. And then all you want to do is to very softly smudge using your fingertips, and you should end up with something that looks like this. This will grab hold a little bit more of the shadow right at the lash line, which is what we want for a smoky eye. So I'm next going to take that purple eyeshadow, and I'm using a small brush. This is going to give us lots of control. Just squash this brush down to create a fan shape. This is going to allow us to stamp the eyeshadow across the liner that we've already applied. And this will just intensify the look of the shadow. You can then open up the brush and start to smudge and bring this up along the lid. You end up with more pigment right at the lash line, which is what we want, and then softly fading upwards. Once you've covered the lid, you can then take your blending brush. And what you want to do is to work above the lid and just ever so slightly hitting the lid as well, working into the crease and blending upwards towards the brows. And this is going to be great for hooded eyes because it's going to camouflage that hood while also blending out and blurring out the eyeshadow, which is what you want for a smoky eye. And then I'm going to repeat the same process underneath, taking that liner first, applying this a little lower underneath on the outer edge, and then sweeping upwards right underneath the lashes. I'm going to take that purple eyeshadow again. I'm going to squash down the brush to create a fan shape and work this underneath. And then open it up to smudge. And then I'm going to take a very small amount of that beigey tone and work this around the edges very softly. Finish off with lots of mascara and lashes, and there you go. A super easy look using 2 eyeshadows and a liner. You can check back in my next video if you want to see you can add a few extra steps to create a little bit more of a dramatic look. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. For today's Monday makeup lesson, I'm going to show you how to fix bad makeup. I recently got a comment saying that my makeup always looks so easy. Well, I do make mistakes as well. I just don't tend to share them a lot of the time, but I want to share them today. So here's how to fix bad makeup when you've made a few little mistakes. Make sure to hit the subscribe button below if you like these type of tutorials. And if you're already subscribed, then thank you and welcome back. Though you might want to check that you are subscribed because YouTube have been unsubscribing people from certain channels. Just in case, make sure to check that button is pressed and the notification button is pressed if you want notifications. With all that said, let's get started in maybe creating this look or maybe not. To create this look, you're going to need an eyeshadow primer, lashes and mascara, 2 eyeshadows, and I'm using the Wet n Wild Rose in the Air palette, and I'm using 2 shades from this, the raspberry one and the mauve tone. We actually had a problem with this palette before, so I don't know why I thought this was going to be different, but I do love this palette, so I wanted to try and make it work. I'm also going to be using the L'Oreal Eye Paint. This is like a liquid eyeshadow. You're going to need a small brush, I'm using the E01, and a fluffy brush, I'm using the E20. Now I've already started off by priming my lids, and when you're doing anything with liquids or creams, I find it's still important to apply a very thin layer of primer. Just make sure it's incredibly thin because we don't need to overload the lids. This is going to create a blank canvas for us to work on and also give our eyeshadow something to hold on to. And the next step is to apply the eye paint. Different from a cream eyeshadow, this is a liquid eyeshadow. It's a little trickier to use, and I think that's probably why this went a little bit wrong. So I started off by applying a very thin layer, and I love this color. I think it's absolutely beautiful. However, you need to be very, very careful. You want to make sure that the layer is incredibly even and very, very thin or very thick, but just make sure it's even. Once I covered the lid area and the lower part of the lid, I then went in with the raspberry eyeshadow, and I loved the combination of these two colors over one another. So I took the same brush I was already using, and I just tapped a little bit of that eyeshadow over the liquid eyeshadow. And this is kind of where everything went a little wrong. Certain areas held on a little bit better, certain areas were perhaps a little bit too thick. And this is why it's very important to make sure your layer is incredibly even, because otherwise you will end up with this sort of patchy mess. I then took a little bit of the shadow underneath and I squashed down the brush in order to do this, which is a little tricky when you have long nails. But I applied this underneath the eye. Sweeping it a little lower on the outer edge and then all the way in, sweeping upwards. When it comes to applying shadow underneath the eyes, you just want to make sure it's a little lower on the outer edge and then sweeping upwards. And I find that this works quite well for most eye shapes. Use your pupil as a guide and make sure it's higher on the inner corner. And this is kind of what we ended up with, and I wanted to see if I could just keep working with this. So I took the mauve tone, which is a matte mauve tone, and that fluffy brush, and I used this to kind of blend in the crease area. And I was trying to keep my hand away from touching the eyeshadow that we've already applied. I kind of hit it a few times and it started to kind of crumble. Now this eyeshadow is quite chalky and dry itself, and I think the combination of that with the liquid, and the liquid was also quite dry, it kind of just started to flake away, almost like a dry mascara. You know, when mascara gets on your face and it tends to dry, kind of just went like that. And I was a little disappointed because I actually really liked how it was turning out. I just didn't know what to do. So I thought, okay, instead of starting again, let's just try and fix this. So I took a little bit more of the cream and I just tapped it in the areas that had pretty much come off. And I tried to use my fingertips to really push this in to get an even layer. I then took the raspberry shade again, and this time I used a flat brush. I wanted to see if like a flat brush would kind of help to push the product in, and maybe the small brush was kind of moving it a little bit too much. So I just kept pressing to see if that was going to work, and then I took some mascara and lashes, and you know what? Once I cleaned up underneath the eyes, it was fine, provided I was looking straight forward, because as soon as I blinked, you could see that it was quite uneven and patchy in certain areas. So I thought, okay, what can we do here? And when in doubt, just cover everything with glitter. Now I also wanted to see what would happen if I applied another liquid onto the lid. I was kind of curious about whether this was going to be worse because we already had so many layers on the lid, or if it was going to adhere at all. And you know what? It actually worked out okay. It's nice to know that I have like a little savior of just covering everything with glitter. And I loved the way the glitter sat on top of the shadows as well. It really helped that glitter pop. I feel like everything kind of came together once I put the glitter on top. I wouldn't perhaps recommend creating this look exactly, but now you know that I also make mistakes, so maybe you'll just be a little easier on yourself. We all make mistakes, we can learn from them, and it's okay. So be kind to yourself, my friends, and I will see you hopefully in a better tutorial next week. Stay safe, stay well, be kind, and I'll see you in the next one. For today's eye makeup look, I'm going to show you how to create this look using 2 eyeshadows. One for the lid and one for the crease. It's a super easy look, so let's get started. So I've already started by priming my eyelids with a little bit of primer. If you don't have an eyeshadow primer, you can always use concealer and a setting powder. This will create a blank canvas for you to work on. However, primer does give your shadow something to hold on to, so that's why I prefer primer over concealer. I'm first of all going to take that crease shade, which is a matte tone, and I'm going to take my blending brush. So you only need 2 brushes for this look, a blending brush and a flat brush. Starting with the blending brush, we're going to work this over and back into the crease of the eye. So the crease of the eye is where the eye creases into the eye shape. We're going to start on the outer corner and blend this over and back in this area. I like to keep my eyes open so I can see the shape that I'm creating, making sure the depth of color is right at the lower point of the crease, blending upwards towards the brows and pretty much disappearing as it gets to the brow area. Take your time blending this over and back until you get the depth of color that you want. And then I'm going to take my lid shade. And whenever I'm applying anything that has a little bit of shimmer, I use a flat brush to apply it. The reason I use a flat brush is it helps the shadow to glide on, particularly with metallics or anything with shimmer or glitter. It just helps them to really hold on to the lid and glide and create that nice glossy look. You want to very slowly build this up, applying a little bit of shadow at a time until you get the depth of color that you want. You also want to pay close attention to the lash line because this is where you want the majority of the shadow to be, blending upwards until it reaches the crease. If you have harsh lines between your crease and your lid, take your brush and slowly smudge between the two. This will help them blend into one another. But don't be afraid to keep blending and applying a little bit as you go along. And I also took that lid shade and applied it underneath the eyes as well.